Picture this. It's around 50,000 years ago, somewhere in ancient Central Asia, and a raven is doing something that an ancient human crouching 40 feet away is watching with obvious, focused attention. The raven has found a nut, a hard-shelled nut that the raven cannot crack with its beak. And instead of simply giving up, which would be the statistically expected behavior if birds were operating purely on instinct without flexible problem solving, the raven picks the nut up, flies to a nearby rock outcrop, drops it from height, watches it bounce without cracking, picks it up again, flies higher, drops it again, and this time, it works. The raven lands on the cracked nut and eats with the unhurried confidence of something that just solved an engineering problem to its own satisfaction. The ancient human watching this is not thinking about intelligence theory or comparative cognition. He's thinking about whether he can use this same drop-from-height technique for cracking his own food processing challenges. He might also be thinking that this bird is considerably smarter than he'd previously given it credit for, though he'd express that thought in whatever language his group used rather than in those specific words. Either way, something has just been demonstrated in that rocky clearing that would, if studied carefully and honestly, overturn a very large number of assumptions about what animal minds are actually capable of. So here's what this video exists to properly investigate. How intelligent are animals really? Not in the vague, feel-good way that goes, animals are smarter than we think, without ever specifying what that actually means or what the evidence actually shows. But rigorously, specifically with real examples and real science, examining what the current state of animal cognition research actually tells us about the range of cognitive capabilities present across the animal kingdom, and what ancient humans who spent every single day of their lives in direct, detailed observation of the animals around them almost certainly understood about animal intelligence that most modern people sitting comfortably indoors have completely forgotten. Stick around because the answers are more surprising, more layered, and more philosophically significant than any simple summary of "animals are pretty smart" actually could adequately capture. The first thing that needs addressing directly is the framework problem, because every conversation about animal intelligence runs into it immediately, and most conversations never properly acknowledge it. Intelligence is not a single, measurable quantity like height or temperature. It's a cluster of cognitive capabilities that includes things like problem solving, learning speed, memory, social cognition, causal reasoning, planning, and self-awareness. And these capabilities don't necessarily travel together as a package. An animal can be extraordinarily capable in some of these dimensions while being completely unremarkable in others. And comparing across species using a single intelligence scale, as if intelligence were something you could rank linearly from least to most, produces conclusions that are at best meaningless and at worst actively misleading. The octopus is one of the most striking illustrations of this problem. Octopuses solve novel physical problems, open containers with complex locking mechanisms, demonstrate clear individual personalities, use tools by carrying coconut shell halves for later use as portable shelter, and show what appears to be genuine play behavior directed at objects with no food or survival value. By these measures, they'd rank impressively on any intelligence scale. They also have a completely decentralized nervous system, with 2/3 of their neurons distributed across their arms rather than concentrated in a central brain, live almost entirely solitary lives, die shortly after reproducing, and have lifespans measured in months to a couple of years, meaning they have almost no opportunity to transmit learned knowledge socially between generations the way socially complex animals do. Whatever intelligence means in an octopus, it almost certainly means something quite different from what it means in a chimpanzee or an elephant, even if some behavioral outputs look superficially similar. This is important for understanding ancient human relationships with animal intelligence, because ancient humans were, above all else, practical. They weren't interested in constructing theoretical hierarchies of animal cognition. They were interested in what specific animals did, how specific animals behaved, what specific animals were capable of in the contexts that mattered for ancient human survival. And millennia of close, daily, high-stakes observation produced practical behavioral knowledge about specific animals that in some cases remains more detailed and more accurate than what formal scientific study had established even relatively recently. Consider what ancient humans knew about ravens and corvids generally, the same family our clever nutcracker belongs to. Corvids have been deliberately associated with ancient human hunting and scavenging activity across an enormous stretch of human history, following hunters, signaling prey locations through their own foraging behavior, benefiting from hunting scraps, and apparently developing over many generations a specific, sophisticated understanding of human hunting activity and what following it produced. Ancient hunters who paid close attention to raven behavior had a genuinely useful ecological intelligence tool available to them, with raven behavior functioning as a real-time, geographically distributed indicator of large animal presence and activity across terrain that the hunters couldn't directly observe from their own position. This mutual intelligence recognition, ancient humans using raven cognitive capabilities to extend their own environmental information network, ravens apparently understanding enough about human hunting behavior to recognize and follow it strategically, represents a cognitive relationship between species that required genuine intelligence on both sides to function. It's also a relationship that would have been completely invisible to anyone not spending their daily life in close attentive interaction with both the ravens and the landscape they shared, which is exactly why ancient humans understood it and why it disappeared from general awareness as humans moved into environments where this specific relationship didn't develop. Now consider crows specifically, the species that has produced some of the most dramatic animal intelligence demonstrations in formal research settings. The Aesop's fable water level test, where animals are given a cylinder of water with a floating treat just out of reach and can drop objects into the cylinder to raise the water level, has been completed successfully by corvids, specifically New Caledonian crows and Eurasian jays, at levels suggesting they understand the causal relationship between object volume, water displacement, and floating object position. This is not a trivial physical reasoning task. Young human children reliably fail this test until a certain developmental stage, and the fact that corvids accomplish it suggests causal reasoning capabilities that the traditional view of bird intelligence as simple, stimulus-response behavior dramatically underestimates. New Caledonian crows also manufacture tools from raw materials, not just picking up convenient objects, but actually modifying leaves and twigs into specific hook shapes that they then use to extract insects from crevices, tools calibrated to specific physical extraction tasks. Tool manufacture from raw materials, as opposed to simply using found objects, requires representing the desired end state before it exists, planning the manufacturing steps required to produce it, and executing those steps with sufficient precision to produce a functional tool. This is a cognitive capability that was, until relatively recently in scientific thinking, considered essentially uniquely human, or shared only with our closest primate relatives. Moving to those primate relatives. Chimpanzees have been demonstrating cognitive capabilities that consistently exceed researcher expectations for several decades now, and each new experimental result tends to generate both excitement and a predictable round of skepticism, followed eventually by replication and acceptance. Chimpanzees demonstrate working memory for numerical sequences that in controlled testing conditions actually exceeds typical human adult performance, apparently because the specific short-duration visual memory system they use for this task is calibrated differently from the human equivalent, optimized for rapid visual scene assessment rather than for the kind of extended verbal rehearsal humans typically use for numerical memory tasks. Chimpanzees use complex multi-step tool sequences, employing up to 5 different tools in a specific required order to accomplish a single food extraction task, something that requires genuine hierarchical planning and sequential reasoning. They engage in what researchers describe as coalition politics, actively managing complex multi-party alliance relationships in ways that require tracking not just their own relationships with other individuals, but the relationships those individuals have with each other. A level of social cognitive complexity that requires modeling other minds in sophisticated ways. Bonobos have demonstrated apparent spontaneous, unprompted prosocial behavior toward strangers, sharing food with unfamiliar individuals who have no apparent ability to reciprocate. Behavior that researchers studying the evolutionary origins of human prosocial behavior find significant precisely because it suggests the emotional and motivational foundations of helping behavior may have deeper primate roots than previously assumed. Elephants, as covered across several earlier videos in this series in various contexts, bring a cognitive package that's both impressive in familiar ways and interesting in dimensions that rarely get sufficient attention. Elephant long-term memory, specifically for individual recognition and spatial information about water sources and migration routes across vast territories, operates across timescales that can span decades, with matriarchs apparently maintaining functional memory of specific locations and specific individuals encountered many years previously. The conservation implications of this have become increasingly recognized, with the loss of older matriarchs representing not just population loss but genuine information loss, as accumulated geographic and social knowledge held in those individuals disappears with them. Elephant responses to mirrors are interesting in specific ways beyond the simple mirror test outcome we discussed in our consciousness video. When elephants interact with their reflections, they show not just self-directed behavior indicating self-recognition, but what appears to be deliberate investigation of the mirror's properties, repeatedly moving to look behind it, using the mirror to observe parts of themselves they can't see directly, and spending time in what looks like genuine exploratory investigation of what this strange flat surface is actually showing them. Whatever cognitive process is driving this behavior, it involves something considerably more active and investigative than simple response to a visual stimulus. Dolphins present a cognitive profile that's simultaneously impressive and frustratingly difficult to test properly given their completely non-manipulatory aquatic lifestyle. Bottlenose dolphins demonstrate language comprehension at remarkable levels of complexity, understanding novel grammatical sentences that combine known words in new arrangements they've never encountered before, distinguishing sentences that mean different things based on word order alone, which requires genuine syntactic processing rather than simply word-by-word semantic response. They use individually specific signature whistles that function as names, something observed in only a small number of animal species. They demonstrate episodic-like memory, apparently retaining specific memories of individual humans encountered years previously in ways that suggest some form of specific autobiographical memory rather than simply general associative learning. Octopuses, having introduced the point about non-traditional intelligence architectures, deserve one more specific discussion, because their problem-solving behavior demonstrates something particularly important about the relationship between brain structure and cognitive capability. The distributed nervous system of an octopus produces a form of embodied intelligence where the arms themselves appear to possess something like local problem-solving capability, able to execute complex manipulation tasks without requiring central coordination for every micro-movement. When an octopus navigates a maze or manipulates a jar lid, it's not necessarily running every micro-movement through centralized planning the way vertebrate motor control works. The arms participate in the solution in a more direct, locally intelligent way that produces outcomes that look cognitively sophisticated, even while the underlying mechanism is organized quite differently from vertebrate intelligence. This raises important questions about what cognitive capability even means at a mechanistic level. If a biological system produces sophisticated behavioral outcomes through distributed, non-centralized processing rather than through centralized deliberation, should we consider the outcome intelligent, the process intelligent, or both, or neither? These are genuinely contested questions in cognitive science, and the octopus sits at the center of them in a way that makes it one of the most philosophically productive examples in the entire animal intelligence discussion. Bees produce another profoundly disorienting example that challenges intuitions about the relationship between brain size and cognitive capability. Honeybee colonies demonstrate collective decision-making behavior that has been extensively studied and analyzed, with the famous waggle dance representing a symbolic communication system that encodes direction and distance information in a specific structured way that meets many criteria for genuine symbolic language use. Individual bees remember specific floral locations and navigate back to them using a combination of landmark recognition, time compensation for sun position changes, and what appears to be genuine dead reckoning, tracking their own movement through space to maintain a continuously updated position estimate. More striking, recent research has found that bees can learn abstract concepts like sameness and difference, applying these concepts to novel stimuli they've never encountered before in ways that require genuine abstraction rather than simple stimulus-specific learning. They can count, distinguishing quantities up to 4 or 5 with reliability above chance in controlled testing. They show what appears to be pessimistic judgment bias. When stressed, a behavioral marker. Researchers associate with something resembling negative emotional states, suggesting some form of valenced internal state that influences decision-making beyond simple reflex. All of this in an animal with roughly 1 million neurons compared to the 86 billion in a human brain. The bee example is particularly important in the ancient human context because bees were among the animals ancient humans interacted with most carefully and most economically consequentially, as a source of honey we've discussed in our alcohol and ancient diet videos. Ancient humans who regularly harvested wild honey would have developed detailed practical knowledge of bee behavior, nesting patterns, seasonal activity cycles, and defensive responses. The kind of applied behavioral knowledge that required and reflected understanding of bee cognitive capabilities even without any formal framework for thinking about animal intelligence. What's worth underscoring in all of these examples is the pattern that emerges when you look across them. Animal intelligence, whatever it actually is, appears to be highly domain-specific, calibrated by evolution to the specific problems each species faces rather than representing a general-purpose capability uniformly distributed across all cognitive tasks. Corvids excel at physical causal reasoning and tool use in ways that reflect the specific foraging challenges corvids face. Elephants excel at social and geographic memory in ways that reflect the specific survival demands of long-lived, wide-ranging social animals navigating seasonal resource distribution. Dolphins excel at acoustic social cognition in ways that reflect the specific communication and coordination demands of their aquatic social environment. Bees excel at navigational and communicative tasks in ways that reflect the specific demands of distributed collective foraging. This domain specificity has a direct implication for how we should think about animal intelligence generally. We may have been systematically underestimating animal intelligence for a long time, primarily because we were testing the wrong things. If you test a crow on tasks designed to probe linguistic social cognition, the crow will perform poorly, not because crows are unintelligent, but because that cognitive domain isn't where crow intelligence is concentrated. If you test a human on tasks probing the specific visual spatial rapid numerical memory system that chimpanzees excel at, many humans perform poorly relative to chimpanzees, not because humans are unintelligent, but because that specific system isn't what human intelligence is optimized around. Ancient humans, through thousands of years of close daily observation, developed something that formal animal cognition research has only recently started systematically approximating: species-appropriate behavioral understanding. An ancient human who spent years hunting and observing wolves understood wolf social cognition, not through laboratory testing, but through the kind of extended, naturalistic observation that captures the specific domains where wolf intelligence actually operates. An ancient human who worked with proto-dogs daily understood the specific social cognitive capabilities of those animals in contexts that formal testing has been trying to systematically document only recently. The practical knowledge of animal intelligence that ancient humans accumulated across generations, transmitted through the evening fire culture we've discussed throughout this series, likely contained genuine, accurate insights about specific animal cognitive capabilities that modern research is still working to formally establish. There's something both humbling and clarifying about recognizing this. The question of how intelligent animals are isn't best answered by ranking them against a single human-derived intelligence scale and finding them more or less impressive relative to human cognitive standards. It's better answered by asking what cognitive problems each species actually faces, what capabilities evolution provided for addressing those problems, and how those capabilities compare both to other animals facing similar problems and to our own cognitive architecture with its specific strengths and limitations. By that framing, the answer to how intelligent animals are becomes extraordinarily intelligent within the domains that matter for their specific ecological challenges, often in ways that human cognitive systems don't easily match or even properly appreciate, and distributed across a range of architectural solutions to the challenge of adaptive behavior that is considerably more diverse and more creative than the traditional view of intelligence as a single continuous scale from simple to complex ever acknowledged. Ancient humans understood this at a practical level because they had no alternative to understanding it. Misunderstanding animal intelligence in the ancient world had direct survival consequences. Whether you were trying to predict prey behavior during a hunt, manage the relationship with a proto-dog companion, avoid dangerous encounters with large predators, or read environmental information from the behavior of birds and other animals that served as living indicators of what was happening across terrain you couldn't directly observe. The accumulated behavioral knowledge ancient humans developed about animal intelligence was practical, specific, and calibrated to what was actually true about the animals they shared their world with, without the theoretical filters and assumptions that formal science has been progressively removing from its own understanding across the past several decades. That raven dropping its nut from increasing heights in front of an ancient observer was demonstrating something that required no laboratory testing to recognize as significant. The ancient human watching it recognized something real about corvid problem-solving capability through direct observation, exactly as corvid researchers have more formally established through controlled experimentation. The same intelligence that allowed ancient humans to become effective hunters, trappers, and ecological managers of their environment also allowed them to recognize, respect, and practically exploit the cognitive capabilities of the animals around them in ways that the modern world, in its comfortable distance from daily animal interaction, has largely lost touch with. How intelligent are animals really? More specifically capable than any single intelligence ranking captures? More domain specialized than general intelligence comparisons reveal? More architecturally diverse than brain size focused frameworks acknowledge? And more practically understood by ancient humans who lived alongside them daily than by most modern people who encounter them primarily through screens? The honest answer is that the question itself needs improving before any individual answer can be fully satisfying. But the evidence points unmistakably toward a world considerably more cognitively rich, more problem solving, more remembering, more communicating, more planning, and more intelligently alive than the traditional view of animal minds ever suggested.